Smell of fresh bread. Do you smell it? You just had lunch. There was bread in there. It's the best thing ever, I can tell you. I'm a big carb eater, especially of bread. A couple of years ago, I learned how to make sourdough. And it's actually quite easy in the sense of it comes with the simplest ingredients. Use a good sourdough starter, water, flour, salt. And you need to get good scales because apparently ratios are important. Whoever dabbled around here with sourdough during lockdown? Any other people? Yeah, here you go, some other people. Ratios are important, my bread mentor taught me, because you can overdo it. When you overdo it, your dough gets soggy, gloopy, almost like slimy. You can't do anything with it. It's not great. I have many of those. So every time you make bread, it's basically a little bit like this. You mix all the ingredients together, you wait a long time, and then you bake it, and hopefully all of it comes out fine. Sometimes it doesn't come out fine. It comes out similar like this, flatbread. And all you can do with flatbread is basically make breadcrumbs. And my 9-year-old loves a good chicken schnitzel. So we have lots of chicken schnitzel with my failed bread, which is so good. And sometimes it comes out like this, and you go like, oh. All you need is just a little bit of butter, salted butter, and go and eat it. It's amazing. So every time you pull out the Dutch oven out of the oven and you open up the lid, you hope to end up with something like this. Crusty bread. Best thing ever. My name is Wai Ling. I'm the head of people at Bilue. Amongst other things, as you found out already, I'm a bread baker, but I also have different roles that I play. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a keeper of pets. We have 3 at the moment. And I'm also a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org. I became a trainer in 2017. I taught over, I think, 200 people across Australia. And what I really love about training is that on day one, you go into the room with all people, faces like you guys and girls, and there's empty blank canvas on the walls. Most offices don't allow you to put anything on the walls because it's next to clean desk, also clean walls policy. But by the end of the second day, what I always love is that walls are plastered with ideas and stories and post-its and everything that people shared with me over the last 2 days of training. So when I did a little bit of research for this talk as well, it's like, oh, okay, Scrum, Agile, who is using that globally? There is a annual Agile conference in the US called Agile US Agile Conference. What they do is they survey people, and it's called the State of Agile survey, and they do that annually. And last year, over almost like 3,500 people responded on the question, hey, what are you doing in your organization on a day-to-day? Are you using Agile, a framework, a methodology? What else are you doing? 87% answered yes, Scrum. Do you use Scrum? So what this says is globally, Scrum currently still is the most used framework that's out there. Who else? Are any people in the room using Scrum, familiar with Scrum? You? Oh, here you go. That's sort of, thank you. That makes sense. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So instead of talking about what Scrum is, most people have heard things about Scrum. So maybe let's do something else. Maybe let's look at some of the stories that people like yourself shared during training and classes. Share those nuggets, and maybe there's some gold in there as well that we want to share with each other. So when I thought really hard about what I want to talk about, maybe we should use those ingredients that Scrum gives us and really look at what stories have you shared with me and how can we navigate it from a practical sense of way, from a day-to-day life when you're working with teams, in teams on a day-to-day life, whether you're an engineer and then a flavor of it, you have many here, designer, BA, QA. Let's figure out how we can use these ingredients and find some gold in there, and maybe you can find that beautiful bread in there as well. So instead of boring me with Scrum in 30 minutes, maybe we'll talk about the 10 most frustrating things about Scrum. So when I started to do some research on this talk, I asked Dr. Google, of course, what is out there. And I stumbled around this blog. It's quite fun. It's called The Practice and Art of Software Composition. Basically, if you go onto that blog, you'll find a whole bunch of articles, mainly sarcastic, humorous articles, written by, I don't exactly know who, community, I assume, really taking the piss basically out of Scrum, which is fine because we all have a laugh about it. And one article that struck my mind, that really stuck with me, was an article about levitation, like how to make your team levitate. Oh, sounds like magic, doesn't it? You take away the chairs, do meetings standing because that's supposed to be better. And there's a lot of things around, oh, maybe we should remove stairs and things. It's like, oh, because apparently levitation is good. It reminded me of Hermione, Harry Potter fan. Wingardium Leviosa, remember? So let's talk about some stories that some of you might have shared. Scrum sucks. Let's start with the first story. We have too many meetings. Is that familiar? Some nods here in the room. Let's unpack that a little bit. So when we say when we have too many meetings, it's a picture of a Scrum framework. What does that actually mean? Most of you, I assume, work in fortnightly 2-week sprints. That's what I've seen as a practitioner over the years. It's most common. Say you work in a 2-week sprint duration is 80 hours. So what are some meetings that people have? So let's have a look. There's a an event called sprint planning. It's the start of the sprint where you come together as a Scrum team, you look at the product backlog, identify what you want to do in the coming sprint, plan the work out for the sprint together with the team. So as an indication of that, Scrum sort of provides guideline. If you have a fortnightly sprint, then roughly max 4 hours should be spent in that time box of sprint planning. And then what happens is you start your sprint, and on a day-to-day basis, you levitate, or you don't levitate, but you come together in an event called the Daily Scrum, which has a time box of 15 minutes. So if you say, if you have a fortnightly sprint, how many daily Scrum times should you have ideally spent? It's a max of 2.5 hours out of an 80-hour sprint. And then when you come at the end, there's this thing called a sprint review, where you basically come together with your stakeholders, the Scrum team, and look at the increment you just produced, the thing of value that you've been working on, probably assuming this community here, apps, web apps, got a flavor of applications that you've been working on very hard. The thing of value that you produce, you look at the increment, you look at what's coming around in the business. Is there anything that influenced my product backlog, and really update the product backlog accordingly. So if you look at sort of the guidance that's been given around sprint reviews, it's around roughly 2 hours. And then at the end, you really look at, okay, we've done all that. Are there ways that we as a Scrum team can make some changes to become more impactful, become better at the things that we're doing, which is called the retrospective. So as a sprint retrospective, the guideline is max 1.5 hours. So when you talk about this, it's like, oh, we have too many meetings. Out of a fortnightly sprint, 80 hours, you should have 10 hours of meetings, max. Now, what does that mean? If you look into Scrum a bit, all the meetings, all the events are time boxes. Anybody has an idea what a time box is? Roughly, a time box is a set amount of maximum time that you set to come together in an event, in a meeting, to purposely go to achieve a goal, achieve a purpose. So for instance, in sprint planning, when is sprint planning finished? When you have agreed and aligned on the plan, these are the product backlog items that we want to do, the tasks that go with that. Everybody's clear what we're trying to achieve, align on the sprint goal, and then it's over. So even the guideline says, hey, roughly 4 hours, it's a 4 hours maximum. So if you finish in an hour sprint planning, great. Let's move on and start and do the work. So that's how you navigate around time boxes, event, maximum amount of time spent. what was the thing about backlog refinement? And over the versions of the Scrum guides, back and forth, and some guidelines in there. What about that thing, backlog refinement? So what is backlog refinement? And basically anything you do by looking at maybe 1, 2 items up on the product backlog and add details to it. And what does that look and feel like on a daily basis? It can look and feel like, hey, you grab to another engineer and you look at, okay, that feature upcoming. What functions should we use? What components should we use? Should we use that per compose for that? Okay, what is that I need to look at? Add some detail to it. You can, what I've seen in the past as well, sometimes there's some architectural diagramming involved. You can whiteboard sessions, just figure out what we've done in the past, how should we approach this and that item. If you're a designer, you can look at sort of, okay, do I have screen designs for this? I need more details. Maybe I should talk to an engineer and figure out what the details are for specific components that I put on the screen. It has look and feel of many different things, but nowhere has been said it has to be a meeting. So that's an interesting food for thought. It doesn't necessarily have to be a meeting, but there's all activities that we need to do in order to understand and align on what it is that we actually do or want to do when it comes to the next product backlog item on the product backlog. So that takes me to 1 and 2. They are done. Next one, another story that sometimes people share. Sprints don't work because we always carry things over to the next one. Familiar? It's a laughter here. I think it sounds familiar. So what's actually supposed to happen? Like, people come a lot, talk about that quite a lot, and it's sometimes I think we all get caught up in the moment, really want to finish things, and then the time is up and it's half finished things. So the purpose of the event at the last bit, sprint review, is really to look at things that are done, things that are valued, the increment, the product, the app, usually in this room, what you've built, what you've tested, what you've updated, what you've written documentation about. Really look at that piece of products that you've just built. Look at what else is upcoming, changing business weather is what we call it, to make decisions really on the product backlog. So what does that look and feel like? A couple of years ago, we worked for an online bookie, and there was this competitor at some point, and they did, I think it was NBA, in live NBA match that you could do live betting. It was a thing, and the competitor was doing that, and we as the other competitor sort of that said, oh, we can't really stay behind, we need to have live betting as well. So what we did in the sprint review, there was a product manager who was looking after product strategy for that betting app. It's like, I think we need to rejuggle the product backlog. We juggle the product backlog with that competitors doing live betting, we need to have live betting in there. So how can we reshape and rejuggle the items on our product backlog to reflect we need to do live betting first? So what the result of that is, whatever we did the previous sprint, what was not finished was not relevant anymore because we wanted to pick up that new feature. So what the aim always is, if you have unfinished work, put it back on the product backlog, because in the sprint review, you might get new information from stakeholders, what the market is doing, that really reprioritizes what your goals were or what your goals are going to be in the next sprint. So basically, if you have any unfinished work, it should go back to the product backlog to be reprioritized in your sprint review. Transitioning here. So you have some unfinished business, put it back on the product backlog, just like James said. That was number 3. Number 4, Scrum sucks. Our daily Scrums are always running over. What can you do about that? So if you look at what the daily Scrum is actually for, it's around really getting the people who are doing the work. In Scrum, they're called the developers, and that is it's only a contested word form according to the community. So people who are working on the product together are really aligning on what it is that we want to do the next 24 hours. It's not supposed to be a status update to a particular person. So when we used to do a whole lot of face-to-face, I used to do this thing, which is quite funny, not funny, but it's quite insightful. When you had the Scrum team together in the daily Scrum, I would note down who's talking to whom. And people who experience daily Scrums running over, usually it's because they're talking to one person and not to each other. So this is about aligning on work. Hey, I need your help because my unit test keeps failing. I don't have a clue on how to fix that. Maybe you should help. So in order to get this feature of the line, we can fix this unit test together. Or maybe it's like, hey, I'm about to pick up a new task or a new story. It's like, okay, so just checking whether anybody already started that. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to do, the setup and start working on that today. Or it might be a QA. It's like, hey, I need some assistance in this QA automation bit. It's like, I really need to understand how you coded that part in order to make my acceptance test working. Can be something like that. So really, it's around the people who have the eyes on the ball, the people who have control of the ball, people who are doing the work, trying to understand who's passing ball to who. And it's really about getting in sync, or moving into one direction, because this is one direction. Another much common issue that we face is that we keep estimating over and over again. Like, oh no, why are we getting together again about that same feature that we just spoke about 2 weeks ago? Like, when does that usually happen? It usually happens when you're doing some refinement or in sprint planning or just before sprint planning. So people get everything together, do some estimation. So people are saying, it's like we're sitting around a table, dealing cards, doing some pokering. It makes me feel like Lady Gaga sometimes. Put on my poker face and do that. Like, what's the point? What's the actual point of all of this? The point of estimation, why it's important, is again about getting alignment. It's really getting the Scrum team together, talking about a piece of work that you're about to pick up, really getting alignment with why is it that we're doing this? What is it that we want to achieve? How do we want to achieve that? Which is where the task breakdown come in. And really about understanding and creating that shared understanding. And it's with becoming accurate, but it's not about getting precise. It's not about whether a piece of feature is an 8 or a 10 or whatever sort of range of story pointing that you use. If you use story pointing, it's not getting the exact number right, but it's getting accurate. Getting accurate in understanding what it is that we want to do as a team. And it will never be precise. Anybody had 100% precision before on estimation? No, I don't think so. It will never be precise. So let go of that. It's not about precision. It's about accuracy, alignment, and understanding. That's what it's about. So what can you do then if someone pulls you in for another estimation session? So probably maybe it's a lever to talk about. Looking at bringing in past examples. It's like, okay, we did this. So it doesn't sound, we did this the last 2 sprints as well. It's like, it doesn't sound we're getting more info from this. So if it's anything, it's a waste. If you're not getting more info out of a whatever session, in this case, an estimation session, probably it's worthwhile retroing why we're doing this. Brings me to the next point. Retros are pointless, some people have said. We keep talking about things and things just, come back every retro. We keep talking about the same things over and over again. I don't want to do this anymore. It's also something that I've heard. So when you talk about retrospective, what is it that they're actually there for? So really getting the Scrum team together and really do some inward reflection. Inward reflection, looking almost like flicking back on the journal of what actually happened. If you talk about movies, do a rewind, rewatch what you did, how you did it. Who were the actors? How did you interact? What the individual interactions were? What tools did we use? Or maybe we experimented with something new. Did that work? Didn't work? Should we do more of that? Should we do less of that? Look at how we did things from a process perspective as well. Maybe someone was stuck, didn't call out for help soon enough. and that maybe have impact sort of on your deliverable at the end. All things that are thoughts, that are great thoughts to think through when you're having a retro. Another thing that people sometimes forget, it's also your opportunity to reflect on your definition of done. Usually as a new team coming together, the organization usually provide you some guidelines of what you need to do in order to call your increment done. Usually some organizational guidelines that's already existing, whether it's from an architecture team, from a QA team, from a engineering guilds. There's ways of working that's usually already there when you go into an organization and you do some product development. And what you see over time is these things change and evolve, because as technology as well, things evolve. And the more you do this product development, software engineering, the more you come to know about what actually quality criteria are that you want to adhere to as well. So what this actually all is about is coming up with concrete, specific actions that you want to take on into the next sprint. So when people are saying, hey, we keep talking over and over, but nothing really happens, are you actually then reflecting on items in the retrospective that you can actually change, that it was within your sphere of influence, right? And the intent is to come up with actions that you actually can take on the next sprint, or if it's not the next sprint, maybe one sprint later, but not in very way future. So it's almost like a dartboard. It's like, okay, I come up with actions. Can I, if I throw the darts, will I hit the dartboard, or will it go somewhere I don't have influence on? I don't score any points. I think of it like that. So what are some examples that are in things that are in your sphere of influence? Some examples that I've looked at the past, maybe for new teams as well, or maybe when we pick up a feature, there's an example of, let's next time do a feature kickoff where we involve the BA, the QA, an engineer, architect, if that's applicable, and do a proper feature kickoff where we walk through everything that's needed for a future feature. Let's do that, because last time just one person was available, they started it, while the rest of the team did not have context. That's interesting. The other thing that you could do is when you get stuck, well, people get stuck, right? When you get stuck, maybe we should, think of a process. If you get stuck, how do I ask for help? Because the previous sprint, someone was stuck and they didn't say anything, and a half day passed, nobody knew, and the next day in the daily scrum it popped up. It's like, yesterday I was stuck for half a day. I didn't ask for help, and that impacted everyone else, because there's flow-on effects. If you usually have a QA in your team as well, it's just flow-on effects if you don't, if you are stuck and you're not opening up and it's asking for help. It's flow-on effects on the timelines and the things that you want to achieve as a team. So these are maybe some things to consider when you're doing a retro. Is everything that we're talking about something in my sphere of influence? Is there something I can do about it? Will I hit the dartboard if I come up with an action like that? It stops the blah, 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 and really gets you to focus, like, this is something I can do about. Scrum sucks, another one. Showcase is too late for product owner sign off. Do it. Because what we're talking about, showcase happens usually at the end of the sprint. And then what happens usually is it becomes, and sometimes it becomes a little bit like a showcase. This is a catwalk, meaning it's unilateral. It doesn't have interaction. Someone walks up, you show everybody what you've done. There's no interaction in fashion shows. And I know from a 9-year-old, apparently the Paris Fashion Week is up. There's people walking up the catwalk and stuff, but there's no interactions. It's just watching things go by. There's no interaction. And usually what I've heard as well, it becomes a signing ceremony of signing off work. Now there's a couple of things in there. I've noticed since I moved to Australia over 10 years ago, that people have been calling the sprint review a showcase. And I think that's where the connotation with catwalk comes from. A very localized term. It was introduced by a consultancy who rolled out agile ways of working a long time ago, and the showcase work kept lingering. But if you talk to anyone who's not in Australia, nobody knows what a showcase is if you're talking about agile. People refer to the sprint review, which is much a better word to encapsulate what it actually is about. So what it actually is about, it's not a signing ceremony, a master of catwalk organization. If you finish your work on a particular feature, who's stopping you from approaching a product owner for some sign off or have a look at it before the sprint review, right? That's how you navigate that. Don't wait for a sprint review to get sign off, because what happens, there's never time to do anything with the feedback. So the idea is, if you find yourself in that habit that your sprint review is going to be a signing off ceremony, look for opportunities during your sprint, when you finished off bits and pieces of work, ask someone for feedback right there and then. Because what happens then in a sprint review, you look at a finished, done product. How cool would that be? Because everybody has looked at it already. It's like, oh, read through the screens, did the QA, did the testing, product owner has looked at it. It's like, okay, yeah, that meets the sprint goal, it meets my bigger product goal as well. Awesome. It's great. Okay, let's do that. So let's huddle around more. Don't wait for a big event to happen. Let's huddle around more and do something about it earlier. So what do you do then in a sprint review? What is a good example of a sprint review? A couple of years ago, when I was working in finance, we were doing something for private banking, and we were working on a web app back then. It was pretty cool because we had representation from the users, the customers of private banking, but also the support team was managing sort of all the incoming inbound calls about people wanting to take loans and all of that. So what we did in the sprint review, we huddled around with the Scrum team. We had the stakeholders there, the support team, the people who got the inbound calls, more the functional support, really the back office of private banking was there. And what we looked at, sort of like, everybody saw the app already before the sprint review. It was like, okay, what were some, in the last 2 weeks, what were some interesting calls that we want to address? What changes do we want to make in that web app to ensure that sort of people can either self-serve, we get less and more calls, let's, automate the boring work and really have people answer phone calls or receive emails or chat messages about the interesting complex things that actually need the brain power. So really what you want to do in a sprint review is really look at what's going on around you, what's happening in the weather. So there's storms coming up with the competitor that I was talking about when I talk about live betting. Or, hey, this is cool now, this is a new cool feature that we need to explore. Let's rearrange the product backlog on that. It's cool. It's really about getting ready, looking forward and saying, hey, ahoy mates, we're ready to roll. We know where we're navigating towards. I don't know about you, but I lost count of the number of things that we were discussing. Do you know the song? It's time to begin. Let's count it in. 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm a 90s girl, sorry. It's the steps. I saved the karaoke for the after party. But I think by now you get the gist. What I've just talked about was really bringing out some real life examples. And what I did is really went back to basics, like bread baking. So what do you do if you find yourself stuck? What I do is really get back to basics. What were the core ingredients that we used in bread baking? But in this case, when we talk about Scrum as a framework, look back at why we're doing things. So Scrum has a purpose. It's about really a ways of working, a framework to help us create value for our clients, our customers, or whoever it is that you're doing your work for. It's based on empiricism, and empiricism is a difficult word for just saying, see what's out there, look at the data, inspect it, make decisions to move forward. And really also lean thinking is a foundation behind that. Lean thinking is all about removing waste. When I spoke about, we have too many meetings, each meeting has a purpose. So if you ever find yourself stuck in a meeting, hey, you have all the rights to ask, why am I here? What's expected of me? Is this adding value to the product that we're developing or not? really about creating some clarity, about transparency. Everything in Scrum has a purpose, and I'll get to that a little bit in a couple of slides. And really about huddling around, really inspecting at the data, looking at what's in front of mind of you, and most of the time it's really common sense, and make some change, just to make some decisions, actionable decisions that drive you forward. So in summary, what Scrum is really about, this is 5 events that people call ceremonies as well for some reason. They're all time books, everything has a purpose. And you can read up the Scrum Guide for that, what the purpose is. But in summary, sprint planning, getting together, plan out the sprint with a clear goal, daily Scrum, getting together as people doing the work, how are we going, what are we doing to get in sync to navigate to the goal that we were trying to achieve. The retro around looking inwards, reflecting on how we did things and how we can make actionable improvements to make our lives better next time and maybe impact the velocity of the work that we're doing. The review is all about getting people together and really look at, what's upcoming, what plan forward, a little bit of forecasting sometimes is involved as well. Are we still navigating towards bigger product roadmap, product goal? Is there any changes that we need to make? And the sprint itself technically is an event, but it's a time box, usually listening to the audience as well, around 2 weeks. There's artifacts that are being called out, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, the increment, which is the product that you're actually developing. It's really about providing transparency. Product backlog is the one list that holds all the truth about everything that you want to do, the product owner wants to do to achieve their product goals, the products contains features, however you want to call it, epic features, depends on what organization that you're in, how you call these items on the product backlog. Sprint backlog is really the plan for the sprint, and the increment is the product that you're developing, whatever it is. In our space, software. There are 3 roles, each have their unique accountabilities. I haven't touched too much on roles today. Product owner is the person who's solely accountable for product, for value maximizing. They make decisions on what it is that we want to do in order to maximize value and the time spent. Scrum Master, sometimes called delivery leads, depending on your context as well. Scrum Master is really enabling Scrum to work, to be successful, supporting people so we get the right value out of what we're doing, or eliminating waste where we can. Developers is everybody on the Scrum team who's creating value. It's not per se to say that there have to be software engineers. If you want to know more, understand more, there's the Scrum Guide. You can go onto scrumguides.org, scrumguides.org and find the digital version of this. But really, it's about, looking at these ingredients again. Try not to overdo it. Remember the soggy bread that leads to nowhere. And really, I'm looking forward to hear more gold from you in the audience, either whether it's via questions or whether it's a hallway conversation. I'm more than happy to chat to you about this. Thank you. I'm looking forward. Are there any questions? I'm happy to take questions.
Fantastic presentation, by the way. So you mentioned regarding story pointing and finishing your deliverables and rolling over to the next sprint. We talked about how they can roll over to the next sprint. But what about in those cases in which the team has hit their allocated story points, completed all the work, and then requests come in to start bringing things out of the backlog mid-sprint? Is it better to sort of agree with that and continue that work and start sort of skewing the estimates, or to start working on and suggesting tasks that maybe the client hasn't thought about, such as updating documentation, improving sort of existing features that they may not have thought about at the time? What's the best sort of way to manage that?
There are several options, really depending on the context that you are in. The risk of bringing something forward, which is on the product backlog that we haven't discussed in the sprint review yet, it might end up being waste. As I explained in that live betting examples, drop everything that you were doing. We need to get onto that live betting feature, which was down there on the product backlog. If you pick up work that's upcoming on your product backlog, there is a risk that you create waste. So what I've seen people do in the past, documentation, right? Painful, but it needs to be done in the sense of usually what you see in the context as well. Part of the definition of done would be updating some sort of documentation, whether it's a user guide, technical documentation, maybe it's your QA reports that you need to, gather all the results about and publish somewhere. Can be different things. So what I would be careful about doing, if you pick up something from the product backlog, explain the risks of it, right? Talk to the product owner, it's like, yeah, we can do that, but are you sure that's the best, value that we are about to create? Are you sure there's nothing upcoming or changing in the product backlog? Is there any changes in the business that we need to cater for, whether it's hooking up a new country to our POS system or something else? It might lead to waste. So what I've seen people do in the past, usually it's better spent on ensuring that the items that you've worked on are actually done. That means including documentation. I hope that gives you a little bit of pointers.
Very much so. Thank you.
Awesome.